This is a land advertised as heaven on earth, a paradise. But its people are living in a prison, and for decades, the world has looked away.
There is this massive uprising against Indian rule in Kashmir, and lots of people, mostly young people, are killed on the streets of Kashmir.
I tried to run, but they caught me by my hair and dragged me. But they still weren't satisfied, so they shot me with a pellet gun.
Nestled high in the Himalayan crown, Jammu and Kashmir is a land of sweeping valleys, alpine lakes, and ancient glaciers. And if India had its way, this would be the only Kashmir the world would ever come to know. Welcome to a new episode of Echoes. The contemporary story of Jammu and Kashmir begins in 1947 when the British partitioned the subcontinent into India and Pakistan. The two new states went to war over the territory, and Jammu and Kashmir ended up being divided between India, Pakistan, and later China. Today, Indian-controlled Kashmir is the most militarized region on the planet. Over 750,000 Indian troops, roughly 1 for every 16 civilians, are deployed across the state. And yet, open your phone and what you will find are snow-capped mountains and influencers calling it a paradise. So who controls the story of Kashmir? And what happens when you try to tell a different one?
The Indian settler colonial project in Kashmir is a slow motion one.
It was no longer, the instinct was no longer about looking for a story, it was about survival.
It's not just censorship, it is an attempt to erase a history of Indian rule in Kashmir, and that means an attempt to erase the history and memory of Kashmiris themselves about Indian rule in Kashmir.
For centuries, Jammu and Kashmir was a meeting point of Central and South Asian cultures and religions, with Muslims making up the majority. But in 1947, two major events would reshape its future. The Maharaja handed over the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir to India in exchange for military protection. Following the First War between India and Pakistan, the United Nations Security Council called for a referendum to determine Kashmir's future. But the conditions were never met by both countries, and the vote never took place.
At that time, Mr. Nehru, was there any talk of plebiscite for the people of Kashmir? There was no talk as such. I declared that, I don't think I used the word plebiscite, but that the people of Kashmir will decide this, which way they will go.
India instead consolidated its rule over Kashmir. The region became a site of routine torture, extrajudicial killings, rape, and enforced disappearances. Now Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi stands on the land and promises development. But something else is happening. Something quieter. Something less obvious. From your perspective, could you give me an idea of how you understand the context in Kashmir? You mentioned Indian-occupied Kashmir. Not everyone uses that term.
Well, I use the term Indian-occupied Kashmir because I look at things architecturally. In order to produce that level of control, you need to think like acupuncture. What are the choke points? Where are the points that the Indian occupation is thinking to apply force in order to control and immobilize and contain the indigenous local population? What I do see is the way in which the military is used as the kind of like first entry into the terrain, establishing of the matrix, and a slow process by which military installation turned into civilian infrastructure. From the military occupation, it becomes a civilian occupation.
So now what you are saying is that there's a battle for the territory of Kashmir, but there's also kind of a battle for the control of the minds of the people as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think decolonial scholars use the term epistemicide, and it's about the destruction of native knowledge systems, the disappearance or the muzzling of Kashmiri journalism, for example, right? There are archives of Kashmiri press, anything to do with the dissent of the, or critique even of the Indian state or the Indian government. These archives are being removed digitally. I think there's a journalist that called it 404 journalism. So basically the erasure of journalism.
So basically they suffocated you.
They suffocated us. They completely suffocated. And what we had, our only treasure was our archives. Because the archives was a rich repository of more than 50 years of Kashmir's history. And that's extremely rich. It's not just about politics, it's about daily life of people, it's about how the society is, it's about art, it's about culture.
Destroying the archives was only the first step. Now it was time to rewrite what comes next. What followed was encoded into law and enforced on the ground.
उस दिन से अनुच्छेद 370 के सभी खंड लागू नहीं होंगे सिवाय खंड 1 के नामक तदनुसार पढ़ा जाएगा.
Specifically post 2019, in 2020 you get changes to land laws, changes to domicile laws, so enabling people to come in as settlers, buy land in Kashmir. So there's obviously the removal of land rights of Kashmiris, and then you have the government taking Kashmiri land. Pre-2019, scholars would argue that settler colonial logics were already at play because the Indian state had been holding on to Kashmir, right, without giving Kashmiris the opportunity for self-determination. And those settler colonial logics take a number of forms. One form is, the desire for the territory of Kashmir.
Kashmir was granted a special status within the Indian Constitution, intended to provide a degree of autonomy. Over time, that autonomy was gradually eroded. In 2019, Indians from outside the region could now move, settle, and buy land in Kashmir. A sweeping lockdown followed. Communications were cut, political leaders detained, journalists severely restricted.
It's been almost a month since India's Hindu nationalist government put the portion of Kashmir it controls on lockdown, revoking Article 370 of the Constitution to take away the autonomy of its only Muslim-majority state.
We're seeing that about the way in which, the whole hydroelectric project in Kashmir is actually mobilized as an act of occupation. The way in which dams and rerouting of river, the way in which deforestation, the way of intervention in a so-called natural environment becomes a way of reorganizing space, always as an act of domination and control. Every settler colonial project is based to a certain extent on apartheid. It's based on separation, it's based on separate infrastructure, it's based on preferential bureaucracy, rules and regulation. It is based in the way that the environment is organized, etc. And we see the contours of that spatial apartheid actually taking shape on the bones of Kashmir's topography and natural environment.
What does that mean to have your archives taken like that? And what does it mean for Kashmir's memory also? Material taken.
It's a huge sense of loss. You know, I spoke about how journalism was growing and mushrooming and flowering in the decade of 2000s, and then gradually you see a decline, you see incremental loss happening. The archives was something you could fall back on. Okay, we still have this, and when that was gone, it was hugely disappointing. And there is a point when you have two ways to look at. Either you spring back, you think innovatively, or you go down in the dumps.
The lack of acknowledgement is a silencing of what is happening in Kashmir. It is an epistemicide. It's a contribution and a complicity in that epistemicide.
What has changed since 2019? It completely froze journalism. Journalists were operating without internet, without telephones.
Reporting from Kashmir has become an occupational risk for journalists. Journalists and publications are expected to simply parrot and celebrate the Indian state, not scrutinize it.
The journalists kind of caught in that. It was like a revolving door, probably. They didn't realize. All they could do was control their own tongues, resort to self-censorship. Because by the time things worsened, it was no longer, the instinct was no longer about looking for a story, it was about survival. So they don't want to heal a place where the wounds are so deep. They don't want to understand the place. They want to placate their own narrative.
धरती के स्वर्ग पर आने का ये एहसास, ये अनुभूति शब्दों से परे है. इसलिए विकसित जम्मू कश्मीर विकसित भारत की प्राथमिकता है.
The acceleration of the settler colonial project after 2019 goes hand in hand with tourist infrastructure, with the attempt of the government to bring more Indians into Kashmir and to create a kind of like an identity, a national bond, as that is one of the birthplaces of the nation. And in order to do that, you need to actually cleanse particular areas. You need to intervene, you need to push some things out of sight and bring in new infrastructure, new airport, new highways, in order to get people into the places that you want them to get it.
अस ना ना सरकार लैंड ना गाश चलेगी जो अभी अवल जमीन अस अगर यमो सानन बागन से इथे क्या कोर वन दबन कहाँ है मार होक या मर याम सानिस बागस अकिस कुलिस लितर लग अकिस
Modi described a railway bridge cutting through Kashmir's mountains as development. New airports and new highways are being built to deliberately stitch the region with India. But infrastructure is never just infrastructure. Every road, every bridge brings an outsider closer. And since 2019, this outsider can now buy land in Kashmir and call it home.
But the fact that what we see is slow violence does not mean that it cannot erupt at any moment with any excuse, in response to whatever incident or act of resistance, to actually kind of like the conversion of slow violence to fast and spectacular one. So my sincere worry and this is coming out of extremely detailed survey of the territory, satellite image by satellite image, video by video, map by map, that we could see is that India is going Israel's way.
Because we already have a model in the world. I don't know why we don't follow it. It has happened in the Middle East. You have to look at if the Israeli people can do it, we can also do it.
The story of Indian-controlled Kashmir is not just about land or borders. It's about a state that has carefully used tourism to erase Kashmiri identity. and used development to mask its settler colonial scheme over the people. The question now is not just who controls Kashmir, but who will see through the story that is told about it.